My name is Greg Hodge, and I'm the Interim Executive Director for the Executive Alliance of Boys and Men of Color. And I want to welcome you to this conversation, Confronting COVID and Justice System Transformation. John Lewis, who made his transition at the age of 80 years old after living a very full life, wrote a wonderful last word op-ed piece that was published in the New York Times last week. And one of the things that Brother Lewis reminded us of is that each generation has an opportunity and a duty to take human life and social life forward. And so we're hoping that today's conversation will be helpful to those of you who are doing the work, either responding to the pandemic and the transformational work in law enforcement and our judicial system that we know is long overdue.
We must assert and declare Black lives do matter. It's not a negation of anybody else's life. It's an assertion of our own life. And before, people want to say, oh, well, all lives matter. So now, wait a minute. Wait a minute. We know that. We're talking about our lives right now.
That's right.
Because not everybody getting shot down by the police daily in their home, outside their home, all that. You know what I mean? But so now the whole rest of the country is recognizing what it should always known is that Black life, which has done so much for this country, formed the bedrock of this nation's wealth, has always been cast aside and used in a transactional way. If we need you to make our farms run, you know, that's one thing. If we don't, then once we move our factories overseas, we don't care if you are working or not, you were never here to participate in this society. But what we say is just because that's your plan, that does not mean that's our plan. Our plan is we count, we matter, we're relevant, and we're going to make our mark on this society.
That's right.
So what I say is that, what does the pandemic tell us? The pandemic just tells us what we already knew. It tells us that large percentages of people of color are essential workers, therefore exposed to the virus more than anybody else. It tells that if you're essential, that if you are laid off because of unemployment, because of COVID, then you lose your health care insurance, right? It tells you that in the context of this criminal justice system, that, look, for 250 years approximately, Black people were chattel, sold like chickens, cows, and anything else. Whole generations of Black people were born, lived their whole lives, and died in a state of anti-freedom, unfreedom. If you ran away, you could be charged with theft. Theft of what? Yourself.
Being able to see, one, the pace and speed in which protests happened across the country and the mass scope and the depth of involvement. There were hundreds of thousands of people. When we look at the numbers, and particularly from May 25th to the beginning of June, I think about approximately like June 14th and a little bit further into Juneteenth, we had the most amount of people participating in direct action and participating in protests that this country has ever seen, right? And one of the things that excites me about that is there's been a couple of real changes that have come from that. So some of them are material changes, and then we can also talk about some of the narrative changes and society and cultural change work that sometimes is easily missed in the process, right? So some of the biggest material changes that I'll name is that across the country, you have seen people and organizers be able to use this moment to push forward demands and campaigns that they've been working on for a really long time around police accountability, around police funding, and in particular, really raising the question of what is the role of policing in community safety and whether we need them in every single aspect of our lives and in things that we have to encounter, right? So you have school departments, both in the K through 12 range across the country, who broke off relationships and realized that maybe there's another way to create community safety and culture within our school walls. We had that happen on college campuses. We've had it happen at one that I think is actually really creative and exciting is you have a whole bunch of actors and actresses who've said, actually, when we come on set, we don't need police in those spaces. We can figure out what do we look like, and have had big studios break relationships with departments and how they're going to think about security and safety, knowing that some of their talent, and Black talent in particular, like, we don't feel safe when this happens, right? And that they have a leverage of power there. There's also, and I think Minneapolis is an amazing example of like, well, what does it look like to re-envision community safety overall, right? And voted and really pushed and worked with city council folks to really vote to abolish the police department there and create something new, right? We live in a place where now organizations call themselves movements. We live in a time where that's the case and don't quite understand what it means when we say movement. And I'm not saying this for you at all, but like generally, I don't think that people kind of have the concept of what that means and understands a full movement cycle, right? So when we say, can this moment become a movement? I think it already is. I think that that movement, one, is a continuation. And then if we're going to put like demarcations in that part, then I could like clearly demark August 9th, 2014, when Mike Brown was killed, and there was mass mobilizations and organizations that formed, coalitions that partnered and have continued and been in work. And there have been wins along the way, whether that's social, cultural, or material, and continued connections and webbings that have happened. So part of why this moment in particular was the size that it was, and people were able to even get the advances that were able to happen, is because that organizing and that infrastructure has been laid. People need a few things, right? One, I think that definitely additional funding, and I think there's a role of philanthropy and would love to talk about that, but need that to be, they need to be able to be trusted. I think that we have devalued and deprioritized organizing work, and what does it mean to really build bases in this country? And what does it mean to create and value organizing work that happens in Black communities? So when people talk about infrastructure, we're talking about that. One of my favorite phases, and it's in part because I run training orgs, is that leaders are not born. Like, it actually is not true. People are fed into, right? I am here because I was trained, because I have been fed into from my parents, for community members, to trainings that I have gone to, right? And I'm not talking about just in academic institutions, but trainings and mentorship. So training organizations are vital to our work. And that's the kind of like infrastructure between continuously investing in places where people can build that relationships to deepen our organizing work.
Part of the infrastructure is the folks in philanthropy themselves. And I mean, like the individual actors who can pull and push those different leverage points and be co-conspirators in this work, and not necessarily spectators, but in-game players who are actively moving pieces beyond just, I'm gonna inbound the ball to you with a grant and kind of check in from there. I need you to actually be running the floor with me.
Supports that I've had in this position have come from community organizers and community groups. It is, if we're having strong community organizing, community groups makes my job easier, because when something is going down in the courts that's not right, I can call on them and say, we need support, we need help. And I think there's got to be a better relationship nationwide between public defenders and community organizations, more focus on participatory defense, where community members are actively engaged with what's happening in court and communicating with the public defenders, so they can have a more well-rounded education and a form of attack for that system. Because the system's not going to go away, it's going to stay, and you've got to keep pressing and attacking it almost daily. When it comes to funding, I wish that philanthropy would pay attention to public defense, because it really doesn't happen. And when we talk about the system of mass incarceration that cages Black and brown people nonstop, you have to look at the funding. Look at the funding, for example, Alameda County. It's a liberal county, very quote unquote liberal. The sheriff's office budget is $430 million, okay? That's 10-to-1 based on my budget, 10 to $1. The DA's budget is 80 million, that's 2-to-1. You look at OPD, their budget's $300 million. So if you pay people to police, patrol, prosecute, and incarcerate we're going to have a system of mass incarceration. You've got this one little government agency over here, which its whole job is to decarcerate, to get people out of jail, to fight authority, and it's not funded. No one pays for that. And so, and the thing is, compared to other public defender offices, we're actually doing better. Not where we should be, but we're better. And so, if you're not funding people to fight against the system's going to do what it does.
People generally are not funding organizing, but like everything is levels and scale to everything, right? And so like there's community organizing, there's like youth organizing, all these different lanes. What I would focus on, and this is kind of just coming from my National Youth Alliance lane, most major movements have started with young people and had young people centered in that. And I don't know where we are as a field if we do not have a massive investment in youth organizing in particular, because that is where the training and development is going to occur for our next generation, for my kids and for the kids that come behind them. And quite frankly, there are a lot of folks who posture as, because we understand, because we know how the social service sector works. So a lot of folks who posture as like youth development who actually are just trying to procure wealth off of that. And they are in the way oftentimes, especially in the realm of like government contracts, to be able to just do that.
Step up and demand that every state legislature have a rental assistance fund. 2, start your own rental assistance fund. 3, advocate for policies that say we're going to expunge all rental records in and around the COVID crisis, and expunge all and put pressure on Fair Isaacs and all the credit reporting agencies like Experian and the other ones to say, no, you're not gonna suffer any credit repercussions because of late payment during this period of time. Remember, the CARES Act helped people with subsidies. If you have a federally subsidized mortgage, you got a little bit of break under the Federal CARES Act, but half the people don't have none of that.
Arundhati Roy talks about this moment around the pandemic as a portal. And I think that it is, right? We have the intersections of COVID, and we have what has happened with police violence that have continued to happen, but there's something about people being able to see in this moment in ways that we haven't been able to see, because some of the veins and veils that racial capitalism has is different. So I guess the thing that I'd want people to leave with is knowing that as that veil lifts and we move into the fall, I actually think there'll be a need for more of us. There'll be a need for more people to really hunker down and understand what it means to be in the long run. We didn't touch on it here, but the election is very present for me as I came off of a call right before here about what happens in November and all the different scenarios. And I think that it'll be another moment that really tells the truth about who we are as a country. So I'm excited that people are here and learning and want us to kind of deepen and be able to stay in this, because the unveiling will continue to unveil more, and we need more and more people to be on the side of justice with us.
Cool. I want to thank all of you, Jamal, Chinyere, Brendon, and Keith Ellison, for spending a little bit of time with us today. Again, our co-sponsors, Funders for Justice, Liberty Hill Foundation, Rosenberg Foundation, California Funders for Boys and Men of Color, and the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color. We represent the Executive Alliance for Boys and Men of Color, which our role is to amplify the voice in the field for boys and girls who are struggling for their liberation, to support our field organizations, people who are doing organizing as well as after-school supports like Jamal is doing with Algebra Project, and to learn and, more importantly, to act together. So we want to thank you all very much. Stay tuned for more. We'll be doing more webinars over the next several weeks. And as Chinyere said, as we all lead up to a national election as well as local elections, to get our folks involved, get folks registered to vote. I got to say, my favorite quote from President Obama now is like, don't boo, vote. Thank you all very much. Have a good afternoon or evening wherever you are, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.